After 3 weeks, there are still lingering questions related to Senator Mitch McConnell's health, and it's adding to growing examples of a lack of disclosure and transparency among elected officials. The Republican from Kentucky was admitted to the hospital on June 14th. McConnell's aides have not explained why he was hospitalized or what treatment he's receiving. The latest statement we have from his team reads, quote, Senator McConnell appreciates the outpouring of support he's receiving while he continues his recovery in the hospital. The senator continues to improve and is working closely with his staff on Kentucky and Senate matters while the Senate is out of session. Okay, that was released on July 2nd. That is 5 days ago. The lack of information follows the 3-month absence of New Jersey Congressman Tom Kean, who just recently explained he was struggling with depression. Under the Biden administration in 2024, questions swirled over the handling of then Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin disappearing from the public eye for days after a health scare. Let's bring in MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Max Rose is still with us. There have been developments just since we came on air, Michael Schnell.
Yeah, we're just learning. I'm just getting statements in from the spokesperson for Leader Thune and the spokesperson for Whip John Barrasso. To put it into perspective, this is the top Senate Republican and the second-ranking Senate Republican. Both of them have spoken to Mitch McConnell in recent days. So I'll read you what I'm being told. This is first from a Thune spokesperson. Quote, Leader Thune spoke with Senator McConnell yesterday by phone. They had a lengthy and substantive conversation that covered a variety of topics, including national security. We're also, again, learning that John Barrasso, the number 2 Senate Republican, has spoken to Mitch McConnell. I'll read you a statement from his spokesperson. Quote, Senator Barrasso and Senator McConnell had a lengthy conversation early this afternoon. Their phone call lasted roughly 20 minutes. They spoke about a number of topics, including the Graham-Plattner scandal in Maine, Supreme Court rulings, the NDAA, that's the annual defense bill that's being discussed on Capitol Hill right now. And the last sentence of the statement is, quote, Senator McConnell was fully engaged and is eager to get back to the Senate. This notable because, as you mentioned, Alicia, we aren't getting a lot of information from the office. I followed up with the office this morning. They sent me along that July 2nd statement, which doesn't really give an indication of his condition. I've been speaking to a number of Senate aides today and senators themselves. Nobody really seems to know just what Senator McConnell's condition is. Obviously, a concern. He has a key vote in the upper chamber. He is 84 years old. He's been serving since 1985, and there is just no indication right now of why he is in the hospital and what his condition is. But again, these two very key Senate Republicans saying they have spoken with him and that he is doing, I guess, well. They're holding up a conversation with them.
Okay, so all of those statements come on the heels of Breitbart's Washington bureau chief calling for McConnell's staff to prove his condition. Yeah. There is a lot of interest, especially on the right, about where he is, why they have not heard from him. Is this cleanup on aisle 6?
They're lying. I mean, these key Senate Republican leaders are lying. One way I know that is because Senator Barbarossa couldn't have held a 20-minute phone call with Senator McConnell previous to this medical incident. That's how bad of a shape this guy was in. This is something that both Democrats and Republicans have been susceptible to. They get so locked into the office, so ingrained in the institution, and so addicted to it, as well as their staff, that despite historic, undeniable medical decline right before our very eyes, they hold on. And this is perhaps the clearest example of this yet.
McConnell's not indicated any plans to resign at this time, but his hospitalization is raising questions over what his succession would look like. I want to read a little bit, and then you and I can talk about it. Kentucky State Senate eliminated the governor's ability to appoint a replacement senator, instead directed vacancies to be filed through a special election process. His term expires January 2027. Yours, is this even a conversation Republicans are having on Capitol Hill?
Not right now. Frankly, I spoke to one senator today, and I asked, does anybody know about it? Senator McConnell's condition. They said senators don't really talk during the off season when they're not in session if they don't have to, so they haven't discussed this. But they assume it's going to be. But they assume it's going to be a topic of conversation when they return next week. I think it's certainly in the back of minds of some people because it's also important to note this is not Mitch McConnell's first health scare. He had a concussion. He had some previous falls. He's been in the hospital in the past. Anyone who sees him in the Capitol, he used to walk while holding onto an aid. Now he gets rolled around in a wheelchair. I mean, there are some just general concerns with his well-being well-being, and particularly with this elongated hospital stay, yes. And you mentioned that in 2024, Kentucky legislature, they changed the law to say that it's no longer an appointment by the governor for a replacement if there is a vacancy in the middle of a term, but it's a special election. But it raises a lot of questions of, well, we're very close to November when you talk about the calendar year. So the amount of time it takes to set a special election, to have candidates, to get those ballots on the schedule, it could take a long time. And so the law doesn't actually say what will happen if a vacancy happens so close to November. It's certainly a gray area. It's certainly an unprecedented situation right now. And again, all coming to the fore as there are these real concerns about just what is Mitch McConnell's condition.
Look, if he could do a 20-minute phone call with Senate leadership, he could do a 20-minute phone call on live air. I mean, this can be so easily wrapped up. They're lying. The guy is either in a coma or is in such like a medically sorry, tragic state that he couldn't do that.
Which we don't have any evidence of, and that is part of the problem when folks are not transparent about what is happening. And to me, because I don't want to get out over our skis here, what we do know is it also comes on the heels of Tom Kean Jr. being out of commission for 3 months and being unwilling to communicate with people. And that as a standard, which, you sort of talked about when people are physically, changing in front of our eyes. There's also just the absence of information and this sense that there's nothing owed to their constituents, right? That you're supposed to have a member of the House, you're supposed to have 2 members of the U.S. Senate who work for you, and as such, you deserve an answer about whether or not they're have the capacity to show up to work.
This speaks to the way politics used to be. I mean, you go back 20, 30 years, they could get away with this stuff, right? There wasn't the 24 social media cycle. There wasn't, such deep analysis of this. And those are all like very good things. But these days have long passed. And when you think about why is everyone so pissed off on both sides of the aisle, it's not just policies. It's not just the ridiculous fascist behavior of this administration. It is also just this behavior of these senior leaders who act like they are above it all, and who also think that we are just utter idiots. Yes, we had a long, lengthy 20-minute phone call. And, oh, yes, the senator's in great condition. But, no, I'm sorry, he can't talk to anybody else.
It's the Washington version of I'm Rubber and You're Glue. Joining us, MS Now contributor and co-founder of Punchbowl News, Jake Sherman, co-founder of the Lincoln Project and former GOP strategist, Rick Wilson, and Hofstra University law professor James Sample. Jake, what's the deal with just declaring that Democrats cheat?
Well, let me actually just correct Mike Johnson here for a second, and I guess in turn correct you. The House has not passed the Save America Act. The Save America Act that President Trump wants is a bill that includes very strict restrictions on mail-in balloting. That is not passable on the House floor. The White House understands that, at least some in the White House do. The House Republican leadership understands that. And it's not going to end up in reconciliation in any way. I don't know about any way, shape, or form. It's not going to end up in reconciliation in the form Donald Trump wants it in. It's just that is also a fact. Now, they've been saying for years that there's all this cheating without any evidence. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I don't know. They want to seem like anything they win is completely legit. Anything Democrats win is completely nonsense. I don't know how to parse that out or make any more sense of it than it is. But this is a centerpiece of their majority, and it's going to be something that defines the last couple of months of this Congress, this fight over voting restrictions and over the Save America Act.
It's so cynical, Jake. What are you expecting come November if Republicans do lose?
Well, I expect there's two different answers to that question. There's the practical answer, which, of course, they're going to say there's lots of irregularities, et cetera, et cetera. We need to look into them by the time I don't know, what the president's going to do about troops to the ballot. I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball. I do think they'll say there's irregularities. Many of these races are expected to be close, but some of them they're going to lose resoundingly. That's number one. Number two, I think the perhaps as interesting is the political question, Katie, which is the president's going to say, if only you blew up the filibuster and did what I told you to do, then we would have had a more functional majority, and we probably would have won the House of Representatives or kept the House of Representatives. Of course, there's no evidence that that would be true either, but the president has spent months hammering the House and Senate to pass this. They've not done so, and I think he's going to use that against them eventually.
What's happening in Michigan?
Well, in Michigan, you're seeing a combination of all three of the threads of what's going on in the Donald Trump strategy to seed the doubts about the election. In Michigan, they are going to have voting monitors, federal monitors, at 3 locations. Those locations are essentially in Democratic-leaning jurisdictions. And there's not really a reason for it. There's not a substantive reason. There is a chilling effect. There is a narrative. It's all part of, I mean, there's sort of a 3-pronged strategy here, right? The Save America Act is prong 1, and the deliverable on that vote is the talking point. It's not going to pass. To Jake's point, they've passed different versions of it. They haven't passed this version of it.
And Mike Johnson, or is it's Johnson, right, Jake, that says that it's not necessarily the mail-in balloting stuff that they're passing. They're focused more on the core points of that bill, where it's just making people show proof of citizenship to get registered, right?
Well, that's what he's saying. He said a lot, and that's not a criticism of him. He's trying to keep up. This is a treadmill, Katie, in which he's trying to basically keep up with Donald Trump, who's running at, 12 miles per hour. Trump has said he wants the Save America Act, which includes a whole host of things. The SAVE Act, a previous version, included voter ID and citizenship check. That has passed the House of Representatives. He is right on that. Now, there's another angle to this, which is the House Republican leadership has discussed a reconciliation idea of a $4 billion fund that would incentivize states to conduct voter ID checks and citizenship checks. I don't know that will go anywhere. And we wrote yesterday, and I think our midday edition, that even if they did so today, and by the way, they might be able to get this in reconciliation, I'm not sure. But if they did so today, it's unlikely that states would be able to have this in place ahead of the November election. And by the way, there have been Democrats, including Chuck Schumer, who have said, we're not opposed to voter ID in a more traditional presidency. That would lead to someone saying, okay, let's get a half loaf. That sounds pretty good to me. That's not what the president did here. That's not what the Republican leadership in either chamber did here. They didn't take advantage of that moment. I don't know why. I think they should have to get some sort of win. And here we are.
James?
Well, first, if President Trump is running 12 miles an hour, that's a 5-minute mile. So I'm pretty confident that he is not running a 5-minute mile. But Jake's point is absolutely correct. And the thing that cannot be stated, we've discussed this before, but it honestly cannot be stated often enough. Voter ID is popular. Voter ID polls at 80%. This bill is not voter ID. This bill is proof of citizenship at the time of registration, meaning a passport or an original birth certificate. Let me be really clear. If you have a real ID, you can get through TSA. A real ID is not proof of citizenship under this bill. We are talking, when Jake says that it couldn't be accomplished by the time of the November election, that is the point. This would create chaos. That is the intention. The intention is to disenfranchise.
So that's what the larger point you're making, the chaos, the disenfranchisement, the voter suppression of it. I wonder, though, if it doesn't pass the Save America Act, which doesn't look like it's going to pass, he can send poll monitors to Michigan, yes. But, Rick, I wonder if it backfires and it does the opposite. Instead of suppressing the vote, it motivates more people to get out there earlier and stand in longer lines to prove to him that he does not have the ability to suppress the vote by bullying.
Katie, I think everyone else made the point that a lot of this is about the narrative for this fall, but a bigger narrative that overwhelms, I think, a lot of Trump's scare tactics here. We're seeing it in the primary results. We're seeing it in the off-year election results. We're seeing it in every survey. Democrats are motivated to come out and vote this year. They are done. They have had enough. A lot of people who were formerly in the Republican or independent conservative camp have drifted away from Trump. They've had enough. I think your point is very well taken, that the louder Trump screams about this, the more people scan it and believe it to be a sense of panic on his part because they know what's coming at them. And I think Democrats are starting to smell some blood in the water here, and that's a good thing for them. They should feel motivated. And all the things that Trump is trying to do with the Save America Act, it's already a dead letter in the Senate. The other things he'll try to do through TSA or DHS and ICE, to intimidate people at the polls, I think that is a huge chance to backfire on them because Americans have had enough of the bullying and enough of the craziness.
There was an interview on CNN with Peter Tickton, who Donald Trump calls his childhood friend. And he said that he is, or apparently he is, pushing the president to go even farther. He wants him to push an executive order to effectively seize federal control of the upcoming midterms by declaring a national emergency based on alleged foreign interference through electronic voting machines. Can he do that, James?
No. And we've seen this come up in a number of different threads. We've also seen this with the Bill Pulte nomination at DNI and the acting Bill Pulte at DNI. Let me be clear. There are emergency powers that are granted in statutes. The two primary statutes that grant the president emergency power, the National Emergencies Act and IEPA. The National Emergency Act does not mention elections as one of the powers that Congress has delegated to the president in the event of an emergency. IEPA is the statute that was at issue in the tariff case where it didn't mention tariffs or taxes, and the Supreme Court struck it down. You know what else it doesn't mention, Katie? Elections.
Yeah.
There's no way for him to claim an emergency legally, but that doesn't mean he can't outrun the courts.
Your exasperation reminds me a little bit of this John Cornyn quote that we have here. And Jake, I'll give this to you. He said, "I marvel at the keyboard warrior geniuses and grifters who are ignorant of Senate rules and precedents, who have miraculously become experts in its arcane rules, promising the moon and stars, and yet destining Republicans for failure is a very effective way to demoralize our base and elect more Democrats in the midterms." John Cornyn, God, nice to see you now that you're leaving Congress.
Yeah. I mean, this is the free agent syndrome that has taken over a lot of people on Capitol Hill who Donald Trump has crossed. Of course, Katie, I don't expect these people, Republican members, to be honest when they need Donald Trump to win elections. But once they win elections, or in Cornyn's case, lose elections, they seem a little bit more free. Listen, Cornyn's not wrong here in many ways. I think that Cornyn is reflecting that there's a whole kind of class of people on X and on TV who say, well, it's so simple. The Senate should just do this. And it's like they don't understand the rules of reconciliation, what flies, what doesn't fly, what the parliamentarian's going to do, what the vote count reality in the Senate is. I mean, these are the same people who have said that the Republicans should blow up the filibuster here on Capitol Hill. We've seen this movie before. We've seen Democrats try. We've seen Republicans try. It doesn't have the votes. Now, you could argue that, Thune is being too cautious, and a lot of those people have, but Thune is, in my view, based on our reporting up here, accurately reflected the realities of the vote count, which is there is no appetite to do Save America. There is no appetite to blow up the filibuster. There is no appetite to get rid of the parliamentarians. So, I mean, X is a very different world, as we all know, than reality. And when you are up here talking to people instead of just chilling in your office somewhere, you realize that. And I don't mean to sound snide or condescending, but it's really easy to say, well, this person supports this. But if you talk to that person, you realize that they actually don't, and they don't want to be a part of it. So, X is easy. Life is hard.
It's hard to describe just how good the U.S. men's soccer team has been in the first 2 rounds of this year's World Cup. I mean, they played the best they have ever played in the group stage. It's the first round. Then they won comfortably in their first elimination game. And they really look like this is a team that can go deep, compete with the best players in the world. And then last night in Seattle, well, that ended. They lost 4-1, beaten by a Belgian team that clearly came in fired up. By contrast, the Americans looked rough, distracted, made some really costly mistakes. And they lost, even though Donald Trump put his finger on the scale. Because, as we reported over the weekend, Trump called his guy at FIFA, which runs the World Cup, the guy that gave him the statue you see there, the first ever FIFA World Prize. And then the one-game suspension for the star Folarin Balogun, the star U.S. player who was red carded for a hard foul last week, was overturned after Trump intervened. And that appears to have been big motivation for the Belgian team, not surprisingly, who posted photos of their triumph over the U.S. team after it was over with the caption, "Overturn this." And this was their victory dance, the Belgian players mercilessly mocking Donald Trump's signature YMCA dance, first on the pitch for fans, then again in the locker room. If Donald Trump had never gotten involved in the World Cup, there would be a very different ride right now, I think it's fair to say. Now, you could just say the U.S. just had a bad game. Instead, a lot of people are wondering if Donald Trump curses sports teams. If he has a sort of reverse Midas touch where everything in his grasp turns to, well, the opposite of gold. It may not sound like much of a stretch if you look at what Trump has done to the reflecting pool and the East Wing, heck, the nation's 250th birthday, pretty much everything he touches politically. The crazy thing is how much more pronounced this effect seems to be on sports teams. It started the month after he returned to office. He went to the Super Bowl and openly picked the Kansas City Chiefs to win. The reigning Super Bowl champion Chiefs then promptly got walloped by the Philadelphia Eagles 40-22. Trump left the game early. Last year, Trump also became the first U.S. president to attend the Ryder Cup golf match in New York. The pro-MAGA U.S. fans were pretty rowdy and churlish to the European team, and so when Europe won, their team made a point of taunting Trump.
Are you watching? Are you watching? Are you watching God? Are you watching Donald Trump? Are you watching Donald Trump? Hey!
Trump also dropped in as the NFL's Washington Commanders hosted the Detroit Lions last November. Washington lost. But that might not even be the curse here, because after winning's Lions wide receiver Amon St. Brown celebrated a touchdown with the Trump dance, his team went on a 3-5 slide and missed the playoffs. Fans said it was the Trump curse. Oh, well, of course, the biggest example recently is the New York Knicks. Remember, this was the team last month that was in the middle of one of the most historic playoff basketball runs ever. 13 straight wins, beating teams by 20 and 30 points, until Donald Trump invited himself to Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Again, the first sitting president to do that. 2-hour lines for security, just completely overshadowing the whole event. He got booed relentlessly, as loudly as I've ever heard in a stadium. He fell asleep in the owner's box, and he just happened to be present for the only Knicks loss in that series. The only one. Even when a team wins, Donald Trump manages to dim their shine simply by trying to share in their glory. Remember when the U.S. men's hockey team won Olympic gold this winter, Trump called into the celebrating locker room and congratulated them by cracking a sexist joke at the expense of the champion women's team. As always with Trump, the country lost a moment of collective joy, and his boorishness tainted the whole enterprise. I said it before, everything Donald Trump touches is worse off for it, and he wants to put his touch on everything, especially America's most talented and popular athletes. But rather than having their success rub off on him, he seems to be inflecting them with his Trumpiness. Is it a curse? I don't know. I do know it keeps happening. It's not the first or the last time. You just want to say to the guy, hands off, buddy.
Leading off our coverage tonight is Congressman Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Smith, what is your assessment of how Donald Trump's war in Iran is going tonight, now that the firing has started again?
Yeah, I mean, it's going as badly as it's been going from the start, and it proves that it was a very, very bad decision to start it, because basically what we're doing now is we're fighting with Iran over trying to get them to open up the Strait of Hormuz and how much we're going to pay them to do that. And Iran's taking it one step further to exactly how they open up the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump keeps pretending it's going to be completely open and, right back like it was before. But Iran keeps saying, no, you're going to have to go down these routes. Maybe you'll have to pay a toll. And always remember, the Strait was open before this war started. We have made no progress on eliminating Iran's nuclear weapons, and we have inflicted enormous costs across the region and across the world in terms of the economy, all to wind up backwards from where we were when this started. It was an enormous mistake to start this war. And as we sit here tonight, Trump still has no idea how to get out of it.
So Donald Trump authorized Iran oil sales and United States cooperation with Iran oil sales as soon as they agreed to the so-called memo of understanding, in which they actually agreed to nothing and did nothing. And now the Treasury is saying, OK, they're going to start to revoke that because of the hostilities that have now broken out. Do you think maybe they should have held back on authorizing Iranian oil sales before Iran had done anything?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you would. I mean, it's problematic to have to pay Iran this much money to open up the Strait of Hormuz. But to pay them that much and then not get anything for it is even worse. Now, I will say, given where we are at, I want this war to end. I want the Strait of Hormuz back open, and I want the Middle East to be out from under the cloud of this conflict. So given that Trump put us in this impossible position, I think we have to cut the best deal we can. But a deal where we give Iran money for nothing in return is not even the best deal that we can give at this impossibly terrible position that Trump put us in to begin with.
I want to listen to one thing Donald Trump said today about the war that he promised to end on the first day of his presidency, and that is, of course, Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine.
It's crazy, and I would like to see it. Doesn't affect us. It's really, it's far away. It affects Europe much more. We're there to help Europe, but it doesn't affect the United States. We have an ocean.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, it affects us if we believe in economic and political freedom, if we believe in sovereignty. Because if Russia is able to invade and destroy a sovereign, democratic Ukraine, then that places us all under threat. And also, Russia has threatened more than just Ukraine. They've threatened the Baltics. They've threatened other countries in Europe. And this spreads. I mean, this is the basic principle, after World War I and World War II. Stops the conflicts before they get too big, and they do impact us. And in a global economy, this definitely impacts us. But let's also not lose track of the fact that Ukraine is winning this conflict, despite the fact that Trump has done everything in his power to undercut them in the 18 months that he's been in office. If just once Trump and Vance could stand up and say, we're with the sovereign democratic Ukraine against the brutal dictator who invaded them, we're standing with Ukraine instead of criticizing Zelensky and praising Putin, that could put some pressure on Putin. It could actually force him to the table. Look, it was idiotic for Trump to say he could solve the war on day one. As you know, he's prone to just making these statements like, I will magically fix everything. And then for some reason, people don't hold him accountable for it. But as dumb as that was, the worst thing he's done is not be clear that the U.S. stands with Ukraine and their European allies against Putin's brutal aggression in Ukraine. If he had done that, that could put greater pressure on Russia to stop this war.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. New allegations against the embattled Democratic nominee for Maine's Senate seat, Graham Plattner, this time of rape, may finally force him from the race. It is a race that is critical to Democrats' efforts to retake control of the Senate in November. One of Plattner's closest allies, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, has joined the calls from party leaders like Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Cory Booker, the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. They have all demanded that Plattner bow out of the race. The New York Times reports this, quote, in a private call with his campaign staff Monday evening, Plattner did not announce plans to withdraw, but implied such a decision would be coming, according to 3 people familiar with the conversation. He said that he believed he still had leverage to influence which candidate would replace him on the ticket and wanted to ensure that the movement his campaign had built would continue, the people said. This all comes after Politico reported that a former girlfriend of Plattner's said that he raped her. Politico reports this, quote, a woman, Jenny Roscoe, who dated Plattner, says he forced her to have sex with him nearly 5 years ago, despite her repeated objections. It's an allegation Plattner denies. Roscoe described the alleged assault this way, quote, "I remember him grabbing my pelvis and being really forceful of me," she said. Quote, "I remember the specific moment where I thought to myself, like, this is no longer my choice," end quote. Politico reports this, quote, "Roscoe previously described reckless and unsettling behavior by Graham Plattner to the New York Times, but says she didn't go public with the specific assault claim because she didn't want to be known as a rape victim." In a video responding to the article, Plattner denies the allegations. However, he said that being, quote, "mindful of the political reality the reporting will inflict, we are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward." Time is of the essence, as Plattner must drop out by this upcoming Monday, July 13th, in order for Democrats to be able to replace him on the ballot. If he does drop out, the main Democratic Party has until July 27th to replace him on the ballot. Maine Senate seat is considered one of Democrats' most likely pickup opportunities in November's critical midterms. Plattner has been dogged by a steady stream of scandals that began before the primary had even taken place. They include that he had a Nazi symbol called a Totenkopf tattooed on him, past Reddit posts that were racist and appeared to defend sexual abuse, and allegations that he engaged in physically aggressive and disturbing behavior toward ex-girlfriends. And now, this latest reporting, the allegation of rape. This reckoning by the Democratic Party over how a man who has so much baggage, to put it mildly, has been tolerated and embraced and permitted to stay in this critical race for so long during an election year where the stakes for our democracy could not be any higher, is where we begin today with a journalist who's been covering the story on the ground in Maine for the Bangor Daily News, Michael Shepard. Also joining us, Democratic strategist and Columbia University professor, political analyst Basil Smikle's back, and senior political analyst, host of the Runaway Country podcast, and author of the Substack, How the Hell, with Alex Wagner. Our dear friend Alex Wagner is back with us. Let me start with you on the latest reporting. Michael, just tell me the state of the Plattner campaign right now.
Yeah, not good, right? He lost Bernie Sanders today. Our revolution, while I was getting on the call here, endorsed Troy Jackson, the former state Senate president, who filed with the FEC to explore a run today. So it's a matter of time, I think. What Graham Plattner is going to have to leave this race by Monday. The Monday deadline also obviously looms, but I think this is really a matter of hours for this campaign. There's just no path forward here, right? So he seems to be trying to exert a little bit of leverage here. I'm just not really sure how much he has, right, with no support left, essentially.
Michael, what is it about today? Is it that rape crosses a line for his elected endorsers, or is it that his supporters are actually revolted by an alleged rape?
I think it certainly is something that starts at the sort of top of the party, right? We saw the leaders of the Maine Democratic Party make a pretty extraordinary move to come out and issue a statement in their own names last night, right, saying he should get out of the race. And of course, National Democrats followed, and a lot of groups and candidates. And so there's no prominent Democrat still defending him today. And I think it's a number of things, right? I think there was a sense before this that one scandal, even similar in size to some of the ones that he has encountered, right, going back to October, the Reddit post, the tattoo, the New York Times story about, allegations of toxic and violent behavior, right? I think there was a sense that one more thing, right, was always going to break the back of this campaign. And this one is just so much bigger, so much more visceral. Right. And I think that it's just a bridge too far. So I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's a combination of things. But obviously, this is a much more serious allegation than those he's faced in the past.
I want Alex Wagner to read you the Politico reporting about this allegation. This was exclusive reporting in Politico under the headline, "Woman who dated Graham Plattner says he sexually assaulted her." Roscoe said she smelled alcohol on his breath and believed he was, quote, almost blackout drunk because Plattner ignored her protests and continued to grab her after knocking over an antique sewing kit, spilling small needles everywhere. Quote, "I had been telling him these words like, no, don't," she recalled. Quote, and the look on his face and realizing what was happening, I just realized that, like, I'm in a situation where there's no consent here, she said. She said she tried to separate herself from Plattner by telling him she couldn't be in that room anymore, after which he followed her to her bedroom and had sex with her against her will. It is an allegation of rape by a woman who has come forward against all of her interests. She has said that she agrees with his politics. And I guess what I'm sitting with is how is this the guy that gets all the deference in the Democratic Party in the post-Me Too movement? How do we sort of, in this one campaign, forget all the things we learned about women?
Well, this is the guy. I mean, remember, Nicole, one of his more infamous Reddit posts was, I wish people would just take some responsibility and not get so effed up that they wind up having sex with someone they don't mean to, right? That's what Graham Plattner said. To say that and then to be accused of this displays such a profound, hubris isn't the word, but it is just shockingly irresponsible. It is also revelatory in the sense that it suggests that Graham Plattner himself hasn't come to terms with any of this. I mean, I think even his defiance in the wake of this is exemplary of someone that is in total denial about the darkest of the skeletons in his closet and the darkest demons that he harbors inside him if these allegations are true. This is someone, Rasko says that the ex-girlfriend in question here says that she, after this encounter, she sent a message to Plattner on Instagram saying that the encounter they had was not consensual and that she never wanted to hear from him again. Now, the Instagram message apparently is gone, but if we believe what she's saying, and I think these allegations are entirely credible, Graham Plattner knew that he had a woman in his not-so-distant past who had accused him of rape and went forward and lied to the American public and lied to his supporters and said nothing else was coming out. And Graham Plattner, the man, never got back to a woman who accused him of rape. He never spoke to her again. I mean, these are kind of things that when you ask yourself, okay, well, why is this disqualifying? That is not the behavior of that's the behavior of someone who not only doesn't belong in the U.S. Senate, but is clearly a bad person. I mean, the levels of betrayal here on both a political level and a human level are fairly profound.
Yeah, Alex, I want to put up the Reddit post that you're talking about. This is something that he doesn't deny writing in 2013, quote, holy F, how about people just take some responsibility for themselves and not get so effed up they wind up having sex with someone they don't mean to. Men and women, you make a choice to consume enough of a substance to lose your self-control. So if you don't want to be in a compromising situation, act like an adult for F's sake. Just an unbelievable mirror to the specificity, Alex, of her account of what she details, or what Politico reports that she detailed, is that he suggested he was coming over. She told him not to. He came over. She sort of says her house was open, so he came inside, and she says that the sex that they had was not consensual. I guess what's so striking, though, is that the New York Times reporting from about a month ago is about, on the spectrum of abuse and violence, it is certainly about unstable behavior. It's certainly described as toxic behavior by women. It is on the same dial, I guess, as these allegations. What do you think the soul searching is? Not just in the Democratic Party, but for all of us who cover these things.
Well, listen, I think, first of all, I thought back then when the first tranche of these allegations came forward that the Plattner campaign should have had a lot more explaining to do. But we're caught in a moment where there is such profound desperation to have some check on Trump's worst impulses, and there is such hunger for Democrats to control the Senate that it feels like people were willing to abide a form of dangerous masculinity that in a pre-Trump era would have been totally disqualifying. And I think it does prompt some real soul searching about, what we ask of our quote unquote warriors and what we abide and what we stomach as a society and as a party. when it comes to, true fighters and what it looks like to be a man in the 21st century. I mean, honestly, without, sounding too much like a college professor, I do think so much of the crisis right now is the collapse of the patriarchy and people being completely at sea in trying to figure out what it means to hold power and to keep power and to wield it in a just fashion. And the Plattner campaign just raises a huge set of questions about what strength means and what crosses the line when you are a strong person. And I think there's a lot of gut checking that needs to happen inside Democratic circles, because what is abundantly clear is this person has not had a check on his power and has felt unfettered and unapologetic about exercising that power and not offering any explanation for it until now.
Okay, normally I wouldn't spend too much time on allegations of a steamy affair, but new reporting from ProPublica and the Texas Tribune show that proving this alleged affair may actually matter legally. Today, the British tabloid The Daily Mail published a video they claim shows Texas Attorney General and Republican senatorial candidate Ken Paxton in London with a woman the tabloid alleges to be his mistress on the 4th of July. And we here at MS Now have not independently confirmed that reporting. But that reporting came just a week after the Daily Mail published video of Paxton and that same woman in question flying to Iceland together. And just a few months after the Daily Mail reported that Paxton and the woman had moved in together, living in what the Mail called a love nest. Now, we at MS Now have not independently confirmed that reporting either. And normally, we usually leave the tracking down of love nests to the tabloids. But it turns out that whether or not Ken Paxton has shacked up with this woman in a love nest may actually matter. Not just because of the alleged affair, but because of where he's registered to vote. Today, ProPublica and the Texas Tribune published a joint report showing that Ken Paxton may have violated the same election laws he is prosecuted as Texas's Attorney General. And according to records obtained by ProPublica and the Texas Tribune, Paxton appears to have used an address where he didn't live while voting in 6 elections in the past 2 years. And in a divorce filing last year, Paxton's wife said that Paxton had moved out of the couple's home a year earlier. But Paxton continues to list the home's address on his voter registration. And in Texas, that is a crime. It is voter fraud. And Ken Paxton, of all people, should know that. You see, even though actual intentional voter fraud is exceedingly rare, Ken Paxton has made prosecuting it his signature issue. His office has investigated nearly 200 cases of supposed voter fraud over the past decade, often upending people's lives, often the lives of Democratic or minority voters, even if they did absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, here's his website on the screen, where he outlines how misrepresenting your residency on election records is illegal. Paxton has literally arrested people for registering to vote at the wrong address before. As 3 election lawyers told ProPublica and the Texas Tribune, Paxton may have violated the same Texas laws his office cautioned about. Now, I should note that Ken Paxton's campaign says that Attorney General Ken Paxton is a lawful registered Texas voter in full compliance with the law. And I should note that it remains unclear where Ken Paxton has lived for the past 2 years. But reporting from ProPublica and the Texas Tribune have linked him to the same home the Daily Mail said was Paxton and his female companion's, quote, love shack. A love shack that happens to be in a different county than where Paxton is registered to vote. Joining me now is Zach Despart, the investigative reporter who broke that story for ProPublica and the Texas Tribune. Okay, Zach, we tried to do the best summary there. Let me start by asking you, is what Ken Paxton appears to have done here the kind of thing, since you've covered this so closely, that Ken Paxton has prosecuted over Texans for doing in the past? And what did I miss about your reporting people should know?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Jen, for having me and the valiant effort in summarizing the reporting so far. I mean, this came out from, I was reading the divorce filing that Mrs. Paxton had filed, in which she had said that A.G. Paxton had moved out of their shared home 2 years ago. I had pulled his voting records, which are public in most states, and it showed that he had voted 6 times in the past 2 years since he had moved out from that home, including in the Republican primary, which he won and is now the Republican nominee for Senate in Texas. Now, it is permissible under Texas law to temporarily leave a home where you are registered to vote so long as you intend to return to that home. That's a provision that is often used by college students and members of the military. Here it's a little bit murkier, according to election lawyers I had talked to, in part because we don't know where Ken Paxton has been living the last 2 years, but our reporting shows that he appears to be living at a home in Denton County. We knew that because we had established that he was receiving mail there, because we had talked to some neighbors who had seen him in the neighborhood, and because he had changed the address on some forms to that new property. That suggests, according to the election lawyers, that he may not have the intent to return to the home he shared with Mrs. Paxton.
You just did a summary of it, but I think people should understand the lengths to which you went to try to kind of show that he had was living at the second home in a different address. So you talked to neighbors, you observed some mail. Tell people who are watching, help them understand all the different things you went through in this reporting process.
Sure. It was a bit of a challenge, in part because the home in Denton County is owned by a trust with a vague name. The trust does not disclose its ownership to the county. It's not required to under Texas law. We want to do the best that we can to make sure the sources that we're writing about know that we're writing about them. So that in this case is trying to establish that Ken Paxton lives there and he has the opportunity to explain why. So then in this case, it included actually going out to the neighborhood, knocking on the door. There wasn't anybody there. But when I left a letter that I had written for Mr. Paxton in the mailbox, there was mail addressed to him there. And again, yeah, talking to the neighbors was helpful as well because they said they had seen him in the neighborhood.
You were clearly very focused on this story. Ken Paxton is an important figure in Texas. He's somebody who could be in the Senate. What are you looking for next? Where does the story go from here?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. There were certainly a number of leads that were following in for many of the Senate candidates and people who are running for statewide office in this cycle. I mean, certainly we will be following up on this story. I was surprised to see the statement that the Paxton campaign had given you because we had sent them all of our findings for this story. Said, look, if we misinterpreted anything, got anything wrong. They said the story was, I think, a tabloid lie, but didn't respond when we said, please explain what we have gotten wrong. So it is interesting that they are contending that he is registered to vote legally. I'd be curious to see how that would ever play out in court if it ever got there.
Well, I think it's quite an interesting bit of hypocrisy in this particular race. Really interesting, compelling reporting. Thank you so much, Zach, for being here with us, and we'll keep following what you're up to.
Thank you, Jen.